Okay? Now, I can see Albert's moved into position already, so there you are. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Yes. My name's Albert Joy. I'm acquisitions librarian at the University of Vermont. Yesterday, our first plenary speaker criticized the current business model used by the major journal publishers, which is characterized by lack of transparency and by non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements. The non-transparency hides the actual costs to the vendors, and what we are imposed with in these big deals is based on some expenditure from the print past with added inflationary yearly charges beyond the cost of living. My question really to the provosts. Now, I come from the University of Vermont. It's not part of a big system. It's quite isolated where it is, the only university in the state. We have very little clout, if any clout, with the publishers who will say quite directly that their mission is to return a good return on the investment
Albert,
of their investors. I'll get to the question. My question is, what can the provosts do to help the university provide the materials needed? And I believe this affects the priorities that you mentioned of both risk, revenue, and reputation. What can any of you speak to your ability to help us and help the university? Thank you.
I'll just, is this on?
Is it on?
I'll start by just saying briefly, at my level, we are very interested in expanding collaborations with other independent colleges in our area. That's our niche, our sector, and are pushing hard for creative solutions to avoid the isolation you're talking about, because I do think it puts us at risk in a number of ways.
I would agree. You know, I think the benefit we have here is coalition building skill, you know, and I think that the onus is on us to work nationally. One institution is not going to change this. So how can we use the professional organizations of which we are a part? So for example, the Council on Independent Colleges, you know, is a very large group of institutions, and we need to be using those coalitions to exert pressure.
Okay. Anybody upstairs in gold?
In gold, we have a question.
Okay, gold first then.
Hi there. This is loud. My name is Josh Lupkin. I'm a humanities bibliographer at Tulane University. And my question for the provost was that, especially comparing what you all have said to our first plenary talk yesterday, is about what you're saying about advocacy and about the role of librarians in advocating for various very worthy projects that university administrations, various folks, and provosts want, including interdisciplinary research.
Question, please.
Yes. How can we, do you have any comments about how we can do that while remaining neutral? As you say, you say we're neutral, but there's great neutral. How can we advocate and be neutral and trusted if we're putting projects that the faculty may not actually think they want?
Okay. Aha, Beth.
Thank you.
By staying focused on learning and staying focused on university strategies and key priorities and goals. I'm not sure I totally understand the question. I think that the opportunity here is staying focused on university priority. And if priority is establishing interdisciplinary opportunities, then I think your role is essential and critical in that. I do think you can stay neutral in doing that by working with, across the university with various teams. I don't think you have to be seen suspiciously in doing that if you are helping the faculty to make meaning of that priority and connecting it to student learning.
Any other provosts? Yeah? Jim? John?
Is this on? No.
It will be in a second. Is it?
Okay. I think that there's some problem on
Is it
both
switched
sides.
on? Is it switched on?
That on the university side, we tend to oversimplify what publishers do, and we say that the taxpayers pay for the research, we give it away for free to the publishers, and they make us buy it back. Publishers play a critical role, and the system couldn't work without them. But on the other hand, not-for-profit society publishers typically increase set the price of their journals not only to meet the cost of publishing, but to add revenue for running their societies. And I believe particularly some for-profit publishers have figured out that the university is essentially a captive market for high-quality journals, and they can price them at almost any unlimited price, and universities will be forced to buy it. On those issues, I don't think librarians should or do stay neutral. We need collective action to affect change, and groups like AAU and ARL and APLU are working on that. But I think that the solution is going to come, as I tried to suggest, by getting publishers to understand that the system they participate in, when it's a public service education research operation, largely publicly funded, they have to participate in that in different terms than they might do in their other business. And until we can get collective action to put pressure on those parts of the system that I think are not operating that way, we're going to continue to have the problems that we've seen. But I think collective action is a solution. I think publishers are beginning to understand that. Government agencies are beginning to understand that. We'll be smart if we do it largely without government mandate by working it out among ourselves, but we may need government to come in as well, and we're seeing some of that with this OSTP directive.
Let me just add a couple of words. I resonated strongly when Beth said neutral is a role for librarians, but I would emphasize neutrality does not mean inertia. One of the things a provost sees is that the diversity of disciplines and the diversity of really business models on which disciplines work is extraordinary in any academic institution. Simply the difference between science and humanities, but by the time you have a school of communications and a school of fine arts and a school of engineering, you're really pulling together a variety of kinds of business models, a variety of kinds of priorities. The librarians in this setting begin with an independence of mind and a university-wide perspective. And when, in my experience, the librarians say, this is a priority, we see this for the institution as something that's needed, that's a voice that a provost both can and should take seriously and benefits from taking seriously, precisely because of that, if not neutrality, let's say objectivity.
Okay, do you
Let
want
me just add one more comment. But neutrality does not necessarily mean being a pawn of the administration, which is sort of what I think I was hearing in that question. To me, it is not getting into that political game, but staying focused on university priorities, staying focused on our priorities for student learning.
Okay, I think we can run over into the break by 5 minutes, or perhaps slightly more, because I think this is so important. Sandy, could you ask a very quick question, and I'll go to Colonial.
Sandy Thatcher, former director of Penn State Press. My question is to John, has to do with the task force's idea about the first publication of a book by a junior faculty member in open access mode. I suspect that idea was proposed by Paul Courant, who was actually...
Yeah, just the question, please, Sandy.
His basic idea is this: the easiest way to get to open access publication of monographs is by increasing the amount you normally give to junior faculty, which is around some 10,000, 20,000, up to 50,000 to include the publication of the first book. Is that the idea that you're talking about?
That is the idea. One way of looking at it is for
I'm sorry, but we
humanities and
can't
social...
hear in gold.
It is for the humanities and social sciences,
Okay.
the functional equivalent of startup costs in the sciences. And a lot of universities do this, as you suggested, Sandy, but I think it's a notion of doing it more systematically so that there's, and we have to work with the presses to do this, but moving from subsidizing presses to subsidizing authors in a systematic way is what we're talking about.
Okay, just one more question from anybody from Colonial.
Yes, thank you, Tony. Tony, this is Jim McGinty from Cambridge Information Group, and I have a question specific to the three provosts. What percentage of the university's resources, your budget, is being afforded to the library in terms of, is it decreasing or increasing? And do you use this metric in comparing yourselves to your competitors, or your peers, I should say?
Okay, this is an important question.
At my three institutions, small colleges, we did not use this as a metric to benchmark externally. I actually don't know the percentage, but I can speak to the rising and falling budgets. Over the past 6 years, on 2 campuses, budgets have been relatively flat, which of course means a net reduction. And that has been a managerial challenge that I've worked on with my library directors.
I would say we use it to benchmark among our affinity group. So that is something that our library leadership does. We have been relatively flat in most areas in the library over the last several years. Quite frankly, that has matched the business model that the library leaders have established because of innovations that we have realized in our library. I think the exciting new direction that we're taking is to introduce an innovation fund so that the library can be the originator of innovation, and also, that helps in being a change agent throughout the institution. If we have some innovation funding in the library that can help to seed some of the activity around various areas of the academic program, that becomes, obviously a help to being a change agent.
Jim, good to hear your voice. At Georgetown, we did not manage to the percent of budget occupied by the library, and I would assume that may have flattened a bit, but we did address specific library needs in 2 ways, one of which is that we had an above-inflation percentage built into the collection budget for the library, recognizing the unique condition of library materials acquisitions. And so where salaries advanced as salaries do, the collections budget advanced rather more rapidly than that. It's also the case that I introduced when new academic programs were proposed. I required the academic unit proposing to work with the library on a library impact statement and to address in their proposal for the project what the impact on the library would be, and if there were new revenues from a new program, how some of those revenues would go. This is interesting, not least because only 2 of us will know that Jim McGinty and I worked together on exactly one of those. And we built a good new program at Georgetown and were able to make it strong because we did pay attention to the library at that level of granularity.
Okay, you don't want to say anything, John, no? No. Okay, thank you so much, all of you.